The Orbital Nexus, a sprawling space station above the verdant planet Xyros, was a marvel of interstellar engineering. It thrived as a nexus of trade and diplomacy where dozens of species mingled, each carrying stories, technologies, and traditions from their far-flung worlds. The station was a testament to unity and tension, as cultures clashed and converged in equal measure. Dr. Elias strolled through the bustling central atrium, datapad in hand, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. His worn leather satchel brushed against his hip, heavy with notes and samples from his ongoing research. The atrium's vaulted ceilings arched like a cathedral, glowing with soft, shifting hues that mimicked the distant auroras of Xyros below. Elias's assignment was ambitious: catalog the customs and behaviors of the Thalans, a reclusive species whose arrival on the Nexus had piqued the interest of xenologists everywhere. The Thalans were known for their artistic brilliance and deeply encoded social structures, but beyond that, they were a mystery. Their presence here marked a rare outreach, and Elias intended to make the most of it. As he entered a quiet cafe tucked into the corner of the atrium, his attention was drawn to a solitary figure. Even in the dim lighting, she stood out. Her copper-toned skin shimmered faintly, as though lit from within, and her silver eyes scanned the room with a deliberate, almost mechanical precision. Elias's pulse quickened. This was Sereva, a Thalan emissary. Summoning his courage, Elias approached cautiously. As he neared her table, he noticed subtle details, the faint, intricate patterns etched along her forearms, reminiscent of circuitry, and the way her posture radiated both confidence and guardedness. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carefully measured. "May I join you?" "I'm Dr. Elias Sereva," regarded him silently for a moment, her gaze unreadable. Finally, she gestured to the chair across from her. "You may," she said, her voice melodic yet clipped, resonating with a harmonic quality that sent a subtle vibration through the air. Elias set down a small container he had brought from the counter and opened it to reveal a truffle, a delicately crafted sphere of chocolate, dusted with shimmering gold powder. "This is a traditional human treat," he explained, his tone warm but professional. "It's a gesture of goodwill in our culture." Sereva's silver eyes flicked to the truffle. "A curious offering," she said, picking it up delicately. "It seems elaborate for sustenance." "It's more symbolic," Elias replied. "It represents the sweetness of shared understanding, or at least, that's the intent." Sereva tilted her head as if assessing not just the truffle, but the intent behind it. "I will accept this gesture," she said, taking a tentative bite. Her expression shifted almost immediately. Her previously composed demeanor faltered, and her breathing quickened. A faint glow began to emanate from her skin, growing brighter with each passing moment. Elias leaned forward, concern etched across his face. "Are you all right?" "This sensation is unfamiliar," Sereva murmured, her voice strained. She placed the truffle down, her hand trembling slightly. "Something is activating within me." The cafe's patrons began to notice. Whispers filled the air as the light from Sereva's aura bathed the walls in a soft amber glow. Some onlookers pulled out recording devices, while others edged closer, curiosity etched across their faces. Elias stood quickly, offering his hand. "We need to get you to the medical bay. Can you walk?" Sereva hesitated, visibly unsteady. Then, with a small nod, she placed her hand in his. Together they navigated the cafe's exit, their progress slowed by the crowd, whose murmurs grew louder. The light from Sereva's skin now pulsed in rhythmic waves, casting eerie shadows that only heightened the spectacle. As they entered the main corridor, the station's security personnel began to converge, their dark uniforms stark against the glowing backdrop. "Step aside," Elias barked, his authoritative tone cutting through the commotion. "This is a medical emergency." The crowd parted reluctantly, their eyes fixed on Sereva as Elias guided her down the corridor. Every step felt heavy with consequence, as if the station itself were holding its breath. Unbeknownst to Elias, this seemingly benign act of cultural exchange had set in motion a chain of events far beyond his control, events that would ripple through the fragile alliances holding the Nexus together. The medical bay of the Orbital Nexus was a marvel of interspecies engineering. Its sleek, adaptive chambers could cater to the diverse biology of countless life forms, but even its advanced systems had rarely encountered a Thalan patient. As Elias helped Sereva onto the diagnostic bed, a soft hum filled the room. The bed's surface shimmered, adjusting to her unique physiology. Dr. Kalen Murr, the station's lead xenobiologist, entered briskly, his dark eyes narrowing at the sight of Sereva's glowing aura. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "She ate a human truffle," Elias explained, his tone edged with guilt. "I didn't think—" "You didn't think at all," Kalen interrupted, scanning Sereva with a handheld biosensor. "Thalans are known for their hypersensitivity to certain compounds. Whatever was in that confection may have triggered a biochemical cascade." Sereva's eyes fluttered open, her voice faint but steady. "This reaction, it is not entirely unwelcome." Kalen paused, his gaze flicking to her. "Unwelcome? Your bioluminescence suggests heightened neural activity, possibly bordering on overload." Sereva managed a faint smile, though her glow pulsed erratically. In Thalan culture, such states are rare and revered. They are induced only during rituals of profound insight. Elias exchanged a glance with Kalen, who frowned. "Rituals or not, this is dangerous without proper control. We need to stabilize her." Kalen worked quickly, preparing a stabilizing serum tailored from Sereva's bioscan data. As the injection was administered, her glow began to subside, though her breathing remained labored. "This should buy us time," Kalen said, "but we need to identify the compound that triggered this." Elias nodded. "I'll head back to the cafe and retrieve the truffle for analysis." As Elias exited the medical bay, his communicator buzzed with an incoming message from station control. The voice on the other end was clipped and formal. "Dr. Toran, this is Commander Vren. We have reports of a Thalan emissary in medical distress. Is it true?" "Yes, Commander," Elias confirmed. "She experienced an adverse reaction to a human confection. We're handling it." "Handle it quickly," Vren replied. "The Thalans are already suspicious of human intentions. Any perceived harm to their emissary could destabilize our fragile alliance." The line went dead, leaving Elias with a growing sense of dread. His steps quickened as he made his way back to the cafe, now cordoned off by station security. The truffle sat untouched on the table, its golden sheen mocking him. He retrieved the confection and returned to the lab adjacent to the medical bay. Kalen was waiting, his expression grim. "Did you get it?" Elias handed him the truffle, and the two began running it through the station's molecular analyzer. The results flashed on the screen moments later. "Xentherium," Kalen muttered, leaning closer. "A rare compound found in certain human-grown cacao strains. It's harmless to us, but to Thalans, it acts as a neural amplifier," Elias finished, his stomach sinking. No wonder she reacted so strongly. Before they could discuss further, the door to the lab slid open, revealing a tall Thalan male flanked by two human security officers. His presence was commanding, his copper-toned skin glowing faintly in the lab's sterile light. "I am Consul Ivar," he announced, his voice carrying an edge of authority. "I have come to ensure the safety of our emissary." Elias stepped forward, choosing his words carefully. "Consul, I assure you we're doing everything in our power to stabilize her." This was an accident, not an attack. Ivar's silver eyes bore into him. Humans and their accidents. Your kind's ignorance could jeopardize everything. Sereva's safety is paramount. If she suffers, there will be consequences. Kalen stepped in, his tone calm but firm. We've identified the cause and are working to reverse its effects, but Consul will need Sereva's cooperation to proceed with further treatment. Ivar seemed to weigh his options, then nodded curtly. Very well, but understand this. Any failure on your part will be interpreted as deliberate negligence. As Ivar left the lab, Elias exhaled, the weight of the encounter pressing heavily on his chest. We're running out of time, he muttered. Kalen nodded. We'll need Sereva awake and lucid to proceed. And Elias. What? Kalen's expression darkened. Pray this doesn't escalate further. In the medical bay, Sereva stirred, her glow faint but steady. As Elias approached, she opened her eyes, her voice soft but resolute. Dr. Torin, this incident may be more than a mere accident. Elias frowned. What do you mean? Sereva's silver eyes locked onto his, her expression unreadable. There are forces at play here, on your station and among my people. Forces that may not wish for peace. Elias's mind raced as he absorbed Sereva's words. Forces that may not wish for peace, she had said. The implications were staggering. If there were saboteurs on the station, this incident could be more than an unfortunate accident. It could be the opening move in a deliberate scheme to unravel fragile alliances. I need you to explain, Elias said, his voice low but urgent. What forces are you talking about? Is there a threat we're unaware of? Sereva struggled to sit upright, her glow flickering faintly. In Thalans society, dissent often hides in plain sight. There are factions within my people who view our outreach to humans as a mistake. They would seize any opportunity to undermine it. Elias exchanged a look with Kalen, who had entered silently, his brow furrowed. If that's true, we're not just dealing with an accident. Someone may have intentionally planted the Xentherium in the Truffle. But why? Elias pressed. What would they gain from sabotaging this meeting? To breed mistrust, Sereva replied, her voice steadier now. To ignite conflict where diplomacy should prevail. Kalen nodded grimly. We need to investigate this, but discreetly. If word gets out, it could fuel the very mistrust these factions want. Their conversation was interrupted by the chime of Elias's communicator. He hesitated before answering, his instincts bristling at the unexpected call. Dr. Torin, came the voice of Commander Vren. You and your team are required in the station's conference chamber immediately. The Thalan delegation has called for an emergency session. Elias's stomach nodded. Understood. We're on our way. He glanced at Sereva, who was attempting to stand despite her obvious fatigue. You should stay here, he said gently. No, Sereva insisted, her voice firm. I must be present. My absence will only heighten suspicion. With Kalen's help, they steadied her, and the trio made their way through the station's labyrinthine corridors. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. The conference chamber was already buzzing with tension when they arrived. Representatives from various species filled the room, their expressions ranging from wary to openly hostile. At the head of the table stood Consul Ivar, his aura projecting authority and simmering frustration. This meeting is called to address the grievous harm inflicted upon emissary Sereva, Ivar declared, his voice cutting through the low hum of murmured conversations. The incident must be explained and reparations discussed. Elias stepped forward, feeling the eyes of the room fix on him like laser sights. Consul, we've identified the cause. The truffle contained trace amounts of Xentherium, a compound harmless to humans but psychoactive to Thalans. Its presence was unintentional, a result of cross-contamination during its preparation. Unintentional? Ivar's voice was laced with skepticism. How convenient. A mere accident that could destabilize our alliance. Sereva raised her hand, her voice steady despite her pale complexion. Consul, I can confirm that Dr. Toran has acted in good faith. The Xentherium was an unfortunate coincidence, not a deliberate act. Her words seemed to calm the room, but only briefly. From the back of the chamber, a new voice cut through the air, sharp and accusing. Coincidence or cover-up? Elias turned to see the speaker, a stern-faced human woman with sharp features and an air of authority. She wore the insignia of station security. I am Captain Lynn O'Rourke, she announced, and I've been investigating this incident independently. The evidence suggests sabotage. A murmur spread through the room as Rourke stepped forward, holding up a data pad. This security footage shows an unidentified figure entering the cafe's kitchen shortly before the truffles were prepared. Their movements suggest they planted the compound deliberately. Elias's jaw tightened. Do we know who they are? Not yet, Rourke admitted, but their actions point to a coordinated effort. This was no accident. It was an act of subterfuge. Ivar's expression darkened, his voice cold. If this is true, then your station's security has failed, Dr. Toran, and the consequences will be dire. Sereva stepped forward, her glow faint but resolute. Consul, we cannot allow this incident to derail the progress we've made. Whoever is behind this seeks to fracture our alliance. We must not give them what they want. The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. Elias seized the moment. We'll find the perpetrator, he promised, but we need time and cooperation. The alliance between humans and Thalans is worth protecting. Let's prove that together. Ivar regarded him for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. You have one cycle to uncover the truth, Doctor. Toran, if you fail, our alliance may not survive. Time was running out. Elias and his team had less than a cycle, roughly 28 hours in station time, to unravel the mystery of the sabotage. The stakes were higher than ever. Failure would shatter the alliance between humans and Thalans, plunging both species into distrust and possibly conflict. Back in the lab, Captain Rourke joined Elias, Kalen, and Sereva to strategize. Her sharp demeanor contrasted with the tension already hanging in the air. We've isolated the footage of the Saboteur, Rourke began, projecting the holographic feed onto a central console. The image was grainy but clear enough to show a cloaked figure moving with practiced precision through the cafe's kitchen. Enhance it, Elias said, leaning closer. Rourke tapped a few keys, zooming in on the figure's gait and the faint glint of a metallic emblem on their sleeve. Kalen frowned. That insignia, it's Thalan. Sereva's expression darkened. A member of the Dissension Circle, they oppose any alliance with humanity. If they've infiltrated this station, they could be working with human collaborators, Rourke interrupted, her tone grim. The sabotage was too precise for one person. Someone on the inside had to help them access the cafe unnoticed. Elias felt a chill run through him. We need to track them. Do we have any leads on where they went after leaving the cafe? Rourke nodded. The figure was seen heading toward Docking Bay 17, but the trail goes cold. They likely escaped on an unregistered shuttle. Sereva stood, her glow faint but determined. Then we must act now. The Dissension Circle will not stop here. They will strike again. The team made their way to Docking Bay 17, a shadowy and largely deserted part of the station. The air was tinged with the acrid scent of engine coolant, and the faint hum of machinery reverberated through the cavernous space. Kalen scanned the area with a handheld biosensor. "There's residual Thalan energy here," he said, indicating a corner near an abandoned maintenance terminal. "Whoever they were, they spent time here." Elias approached the terminal, its screen flickering weakly. He connected his datapad and began sifting through the logs. "They accessed this terminal to override security protocols," he muttered. "But wait, they left something behind." A file appeared on the screen, a transmission encoded in both Thalan and human languages. Sereva leaned in, her expression tightening as she read it. "It's a manifesto," she said, her voice heavy. "The Dissension Circle is planning a larger attack. They're targeting the Unity Summit scheduled for tomorrow." Elias's blood ran cold. The Unity Summit was a high-profile event, bringing together leaders from across the galaxy to discuss trade and diplomacy. If an attack occurred there, it would be catastrophic. "We need to alert Commander Vren," Rourke said, already reaching for her communicator. "No," Sereva interjected sharply. "If we make this public now, the Dissension Circle will know we're on to them. We must act covertly." Rourke hesitated but nodded. "Then we'll need a plan, and fast." Back in the secure operations room, the team devised a strategy. They would infiltrate the Unity Summit under the guise of security personnel, using Kalen's biosensors to scan for traces of Xentherium or other dangerous substances. Meanwhile, Rourke would monitor station-wide activity for any signs of coordinated sabotage. Sereva insisted on joining the infiltration team despite Elias's protests. "This is as much my fight as yours," she said firmly. "If the Dissension Circle sees me there, it might disrupt their plans." Elias relented, though the thought of her in harm's way filled him with dread. The Unity Summit began the next day in the Grand Assembly Hall, its towering crystal spires shimmering under the artificial light of the station. Delegates from dozens of species filled the room, their voices a low murmur as they prepared for the opening address. Elias, Sereva, and Kalen moved through the crowd, their movements calculated. Kalen's biosensor occasionally chirped, but the readings were low and inconclusive. "I don't like this," Elias muttered. "It's too quiet." As the opening address began, Sereva suddenly froze, her glow flaring. "They're here," she whispered, her silver eyes darting across the room. Elias followed her gaze to a cluster of Thalan delegates near the far wall. One of them, cloaked and hooded, was subtly placing a device beneath a table. "That's them," Sereva said, her voice tight. Kalen nodded. "The biosensor confirms it. That device is laced with Xentherium." Rourke's voice came through Elias's communicator. "Security's standing by. Do you want them to move in?" "No," Elias said quickly. "We'll handle this quietly. If we cause a panic, it'll play right into their hands." The team approached the cloaked figure carefully, their movements masked by the flow of the crowd. As they neared, Elias saw the figure tense, their hand reaching for a concealed weapon. Before they could act, Sereva stepped forward, her glow intensifying into a brilliant flare that drew the attention of everyone in the room. "Enough," she said, her voice reverberating with a commanding power that silenced the crowd. The figure froze, their hand dropping. Rourke and a team of security officers moved in swiftly, apprehending the saboteur and disarming the device. As the tension in the room ebbed, Elias turned to Sereva, his expression a mixture of relief and admiration. "You just saved the summit." Sereva nodded, her glow dimming. "But the Dissension Circle is far from defeated. This was only the beginning." The interrogation revealed the Dissension Circle's plan to use the summit as a stage for fear and division. Armed with this knowledge, Elias, Sereva, and Rourke worked through the night to compile irrefutable evidence of the plot. Their findings would be presented to both human and Thalan leaders at an emergency session. The meeting was tense. Consul Ivar and Commander Vren stood at the center, their authority reflected in their solemn gazes. As Elias and Sereva presented their case, holographic projections illuminated the room. The Saboteur's actions, the manifesto, and the Xentherium device. The circle sought to fracture us, Sereva concluded, her voice firm, but their failure proves the strength of our alliance. The room held its breath. Then Ivar spoke, his tone resolute. The circle's betrayal will not define us. Let this be a turning point. Commander Vren nodded. We stand together. Today, trust has won. Applause echoed through the chamber, a cautious but hopeful sign of unity. As the station settled into an uneasy calm, Elias and Sereva stood on the observation deck, watching the stars. We've stopped one plot, Elias said, but the road ahead won't be easy. Sereva's faint glow brightened. Nothing worth building ever is, but today we chose peace. As the stars shimmered, they knew their fragile triumph was the first step toward something greater, a shared future built on trust and resilience. If this tale made your night a little brighter, hit subscribe and let's explore more together.